Drink some water. I was slacking on my pimping. I'm at my water intake today, so I'm at my 1:30 p.m. water at 7:46. So, you know what that means. It's going to be a lot of are we recording? I think we recording. Something in my lip gloss. That's the most disgusting feeling. Okay. Oh gosh. Oh goodness. I like my little anti-capitalism magnet. Well, let me just look at one thing. Okay. Okay. Man. Well, shit. How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of Ask Me How I Know, the podcast where I let you know exactly how I know that healing is possible, magic is real, and love is the answer. I am your host. I go by Coach Ebony said on all social media handles. My name is Ebony Isis Booth. I am a twice certified life coach, certified in transformation and equity, as well as healing, justice, and liberation, or liberatory coaching methods. And I work at the intersection of Black womanist liberation. In short, I listen to Black women. That's what I do. I listen to Black women. When nobody else does, I do. I specifically listen to Black women in leadership. And by doing so, it's my mission and my goal to guide as many Black women as possible and is sustainable for my body, my somebody, to hold on to just guide them toward self leadership and self energy, an energy of self healing, self love, and self actualization, not in the spirit of, gross individualism, but in the spirit of cultural sustainability. So I do that by working with women in one-on-one coaching containers. I host community trainings and calls. I am a facilitator and cultural strategist. I curate compelling community engagement events that are designed to celebrate the fact that we deserve to see ourselves elevated. And I've been at this work now. I've been coaching for 5 years, but I've been coming up on this work in this vein of community organizing, community engagement, and cultural strategies through communications and marketing and education and wholesale distribution to various markets for 25 years of my adult life. And it's interesting because in this week's episode, we are going to talk about perfectionism. We're going to talk about my journey with my relationship to perfectionism and some interesting truths that have recently made themselves known to me as we near the end of 2024. It's been a big year. And we're not quite at the finish line yet. So this episode isn't necessarily the year-end review episode as much as what has been going on with me? How do I continue to show up to this work for myself in such a way that I am certain that I'm not going to coach you through in the name of something that I'm not willing to do, which is my work. I'm not going to be a guide unto others in doing their work if I'm sitting someplace not doing my work. My healing don't quite turn over like that for me. And in my going and coming and being and just getting through and going through what is in front of me in these past several months, but particularly these past few weeks, I had to turn my attention towards perfectionism. And this week, we're going to talk about how I got to a place with my relationship with perfectionism where I had to ask it some questions about what its intentions are and what it desires for me and my system rather than trying to fix it or cure it or recover from it as if it was has been some sort of ailment. Largely, that perfectionist part of me and my identity has been responsible to some degree for much of my success and has been integral to a lot of my identity development. And sometimes in this healing journey, we have to stop and check in with the parts and see how everyone is getting along inside our internal systems. So I'm going to take you with me in this episode along a bit of a journey to my inner family systems, my parts, and hopefully you will be able to take something useful from it. And we're going to nerd out on this journey and talk about healing first. Then we'll talk about my personal parts party and the method that I used to get to some more information from my perfectionist part. And then I'm going to bring in some information about the impact of, what is mine and what is actually a byproduct or a function of the white supremacist colonial project that is being Black and woman in the United States of America. Why I'm trying to hog tie my perfectionist, I maybe can ask it the question of what does it look like to decolonize my relationship to perfectionism and make it Black as fuck and therefore something to be celebrated. So that's the plan for today's episode. I picked a new location to record. I really am excited about this episode or just having this conversation. I also went and plugged in my handy dandy podcast mic and picked a different location in my office to sit at instead of sitting at my desk, because today, at the end of the year, at the end of the day, I found myself literally just staring at the wall off into space, sitting in my office chair, and was like, I have to move. I have to relocate. I cannot sit here for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes and record this episode sitting at this desk, staring at this computer, near another minute. So I'm in the corner. I got my notes. I got my iPad. I got my water. And I'm ready to go. There might be some appearances from Avery. I don't know. He might have also sent himself to bed. I'm not sure. So we gonna make it do what it do. So I want to let's start with healing is possible. Last week we had an episode on Onik Mansi, the episode 10, new set, who this, you know what I mean? 10 perfect 10 nails, new set, new nails. An update, I have chipped both of my thumbs. This would never happen with an airbrush French manicure, but with 3 layers of hard gel on top of some acrylic, what you gonna do is chip the tips off. So here we are a week later, and I have 2 chipped thumbs. So neither here nor there. If you haven't had an opportunity to listen to last week's episode, new set, who it is, please go check it out. A lot of gems in there. I had a great time with my bestie from Homegirl Oracle, Erica Diane. We had a good old fashioned time. And last week we were focused on magic is real and how we know magic is real and how our nails become wands in the manifestation of the reality that we wish to see. And this week we're going to talk about how I know that healing is possible. Healing is not just possible. Healing is also nonlinear. Healing is cyclical. It is messy. It can be painful to tender, and then sometimes numbing at any various place in the process. Healing is absolutely transformative in an alchemical way, like in a transmutative way. Like you started off as one thing and become something wholly other than that, like a chemical reconstitution of your structure, like phoenix risen from ashes, like the fire you burn and were turned to ash and then resurrected yourself in a new form and new being. Healing is that girl. And as I've just described, it's a very much a process, one that cannot be rushed. It does not abide by the temporal laws of space and time as as we see them in our modern Western society. It's its own thing, but it is possible. And I know sometimes when we experience acute trauma, pain, loss, grief, setbacks, when we're facing the unknown or the inevitability of or what we're assuming is going to be an inevitable destruction, right? We're projecting some worry into the future of something that has not yet occurred. We can think that healing is actually impossible. When we see ourselves as broken, we are Humpty Dumpty, off the wall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put us back together again. We are fundamentally broken. That is a realistic of a way of understanding oneself, depending on what we may or may not have experienced in our lives. But healing is also about being able to shift our ways of thinking or our thought process from this is utterly impossible, to turning an eye toward, but what if it were possible? What is possible? And sometimes in coaching, well, a coach who finds someone in a place where they have a very limited view or limited perspective and are in that place of feeling bound in impossibility, the work really is to see what's in the way and see what's taking up all the space that is making someone feel like possibility is not available to them. So you get into a place in session sometimes where, a client will say at the end of the call, you check in and say, like, how are you feeling? And their response is, I feel more possible. And that's huge. You create space to even consider possibility. And that's the spark that creates an opening to step in. Because once something becomes possible and you start to get curious about the possibility, the next place that you can move to is probability. So, what is the probability that that thing might happen? What might it need in order to go? What's missing? What could we add in or take away? What could be modified to increase the probability and likelihood of the possibility becoming then an inevitability? And I think that this exercise kind of works in a lot of ways. Like we could take a scenario of like worst case scenario and be like, you know, go all the way down the doomsday scroll of like, well, we're gonna be living, like, for instance, a nightmarish reality of one coach partner was that we would be living in the Handmaid's Tale. And it's like, okay, let's go there. What would need to happen between now and the day that you are cloaked in red fabric in order for that to be an inevitable truth of your future? What would have to happen? How many things would have to, how many choices would you have to make between now and the day of the outlandish, nightmarish fantasy of worry, doom, and fret that is consuming us on today? Right. And once we give ourselves permission to dream forward in that way, we start to realize that, oh, it's actually not probable. Is it possible? Maybe. Even if it is inevitable, is the inevitability something that I should be functioning in now? Or are we talking about something that's probably going to take a 30-year timeline to take effect? I don't know. Is there something that we can do to interrupt that today? I'm just saying that we get curious about it. We can start to create space for more, as opposed to isolating and shutting ourselves down and getting underneath the covers and pulling the blankets up over our head and hoping to stay there and wishing it all would just go away. Because it's not necessarily an effective tool, not in the long term. It might be something that you need to take cover, take to the bed for a couple of days, but on the third day, you're going to have to get up out that bed, child. So yeah, healing is possible, is loaded, but if there is a glimmer of hope and positivity that healing is possible, then that means that you too are possible. And that means that there is a probability that you are equipped with everything that you need, that you came earthside with all that you would need already inside you to foster to give birth to dreams, to foster them into reality and to make that inevitable, you know? So, but in order to do that, we have to do our work, right, Avery? Yeah, we have to do our work. And not all of our work is shadow work. Some of our work is going to require sunlight. Some work is going to require fresh air and clean water and maybe a medicinal salve or cream, a clean bandage, some rest. And by rest, I mean like actual sleep, nourishment, right? Then some exercise and use, right? Some practice to relearn how to function. Once the healing has taken place, it is again a process. And doing that work in isolation can be very difficult. It is important to have community in the doing of that work. And so it's my hope that by sharing this personal experience with how I am nurturing my perfectionist parts and the ways in which perfectionism has served me and may no longer be serving me. And I just need to check in with that as we come into the end of this year before I set my 2025 goals. This is, in a way, me sharing in community my healing process. And so this is not shadow work that I'm doing in isolation, rather light work that I'm doing in public. How, you know, and all the things, it's like with any wound, right? Maybe not any wound, but like an injury, an injurious like wound. If I cut myself bad and it goes cut myself down to the white meat show, you know, pretty bad, it's going to need some attention and some time. Some nerves may have been severed and damaged. There might be, the muscles are going to bruise. The wound is going to get gross and ugly and turn different colors and be itchy, and this the it might need stitches or staples, or maybe it needs glue, and then a scab is going to form. It's going to fall off. I'm going to need to pay attention to it and make sure it doesn't turn green and things start oozing out of the side of it. I need to be tender with it and hold it gingerly and like speak love into it and massage the parts around it to keep it strong and let it know that it's loved and is still a part of me, right? Like that is just how much attention and time and energy and love and intention it takes to heal from our spiritual harms, from physical harms, from mental harms, psychic attacks, you know, internal conflicts and battles. It requires, I mean, we are equipped with everything that we need to do to allow the healing to take process, but I think sometimes we are just so distracted, and we have so many other coping mechanisms and strategies and approaches to avoid the intentionality that is often needed in order to heal well and to heal better and to mend in some ways where we actually learn from the root causes of the injury in the first place. So, yeah, healing is possible. So, the past couple of weeks, my spirit has been troubled. I have been, and I would say, I'm going to go so far as to say this goes back to early November, maybe late October. I don't know, all year. You know, my spirit's been troubled lately, but these past couple of weeks, it's been more acutely troubled in a way that I've noticed that I was heading to a parts party where myself, my critical mass of self energy, my conscious self, my best and highest expression of me was maybe not driving the bus to the parts party. I'm on a party bus and I'm heading to the function, but my other parts may have been commandeering the ride and the transportation. And, you know, that feeling, if you can relate to that at all, please let me know. Send me an email, something. Let me know I'm not out here just spitting in the wind, but it was activated by like several factors. And when I got curious about it, I'm like, okay, what is going on with my mood? Why am I bugging? And in reflection, I came up with three kind of immediate things: decision fatigue, growth grief, and future focused feedback. Future focused feedback. Alliteration. It is what it is. So the decision fatigue piece, this has just really been around a lot of adulting, including like the elections, making life insurance elections or selections and choices, open enrollment, very adulty things, retirement plans, scheduling doctor's appointments, just those decisions that are constant: what to eat, when to go to the grocery store, the dog's food schedule, buying new food, for like just life, been lifing. And I realized like I am the only somebody responsible for making all these choices for me and all of my parts. And while sometimes I keep a picture of little girl me and my grandmother. I was probably about 7 in this picture. And I keep it in my office to remind me and her, like, girl. And I'm wearing a t-shirt, a white t-shirt that says in big pink letters, it was my favorite t-shirt, and it said paradise across the front of it. And so I'm making choices for her, for me, like I am her. We grew up to become this version of myself. And so somebody has to make the choices, sis, and it's us. And we do an excellent job. Okay. knocking it out of the fucking park. And sometimes I get very tired. It's a lot. Growth grief and decision fatigue is an actual thing. It's like a, I don't know if it's not like in the DSM-5 or anything like that, I don't think, but it's a real thing. Your girl has been experiencing decision fatigue. Adulting is whipping my ass. And the end of 2024 has not really let up ever since Pluto's stationed out of Aquarius. I feel like Pluto took its foot off my neck and put its finger right against my temple to punk me into 2025. Like, eh. So growth grief. Growth grief, I kind of just made that up, but it's similar and ties into the decision fatigue, but in a way that like I have been noticing and, celebrating my silver hairs and my growing upness, all 43 years of myself and being on this planet and my life that I've created for myself. And I love it so much. I'm so deeply privileged and grateful and honored and sometimes really in awe that like I get to live this life. And at the same time, that comes with the reality of like, getting older. And there's some grief that comes along with that, grieving the parts of myself, the previous versions of me who were not as established yet, who didn't have it figured out, who were making maybe the best choices with the information they had at the time. But in retrospect, maybe some dicey decisions were being made, or where I wasn't loving myself fully or showing up as my best self. And so the older I become, also the wiser I get. And that wisdom has like a pang of like just like a tenderness, a softness to it of being like, baby girl, like, whew. At the same time, realizing that now, y'all, hey, millennials, as an elder millennial, we are the Mr. Beldings of this shit. We're the grown-ups. It's us, right? We are the adults. And I have been maybe a little bit overwhelmed at feeling a sense of responsibility as I see elders transition and pass away. Nikki Giovanni, Ibaye, like to see that, feel the weight of that grief and understand that that's 3 generations of impact that she's held through her work as a poet. And also to not really know how to relate to Gen Z and Gen Alpha in relation to the importance of that is something that I consider. Like, I'm just curious about what my place in the world is, or if that even matters, or who am I impacting and how am I showing up? What kind of ancestor am I becoming is a very real thing that I think about perhaps a little too often. But lately, often, I've been thinking about that through the lens of like wisdom, elders transitioning, and also becoming an elder. And there's a lot of social media debate around whether or not Black women want to be called auntie, and like what that means, and the adultification of young Black girls, and Black women not wanting to have that title, and all of that stuff. And I'm like, I have actual nieces. What is my relationship like with my actual nieces who call me auntie? I don't give a damn about the girls on the internet. I'm talking about my actual need. Like, what kind of ancestor am I becoming, and what kind of elder am I? That's what I'm thinking about. And again, decision fatigue, right? As if I don't have enough to be worried about. So here we are. And then another thing that activated these parts and sent me on the way to the parts party has been future focused feedback. Again, life insurance, retirement policies, what kind of ancestor am I becoming, retirement plans, and are you planning on buying a house, and just all the questions, and why are you single, and do you want a husband, are you looking for a man, and I don't want to talk about any of that. Receiving feedback in the professional space, preparing for next year professionally, setting goals for my coaching practice, as well as really ambitious goals for my professional work for my job, not having any intention on like girl bossing my way out of employment, like really trying to secure the bag and also create additional passive revenue streams to, outfit this legacy building that I'm interested in doing, and being open to allow myself to be witnessed by people I love and respect and admire so that they can give me feedback about how I'm doing at that. Y'all, that shit is not for the faint of heart. It's like boss level healing journey is when you're like, tell me how I'm doing. What was your impression of this experience of me? And then you sit and you hear it and you take it and you don't trip. Cause holy shit, the parts were like, what is happening? Who is he talking to? What you mean? I didn't, let me explain. It was intense. So how did I know that I was activated? Well, I became irritable. I mean, straight up irritable. I have been like super at peace. Like my year, my initiation of becoming a priest of Oshun and practicing and dedicating myself to this religious tradition, and which really is about love and love of self, has brought me so much peace and really shifted my relationship to sadness that I had been carrying around me like an anchor that was making me kind of mean spirited and aggravated all the damn time. I felt relief, reprise from that. I felt liberated from it. I felt it move and be lifted and carried away from me. And then I experienced some more grief. And then I was like, ooh, I'm sad. Like Nikki Giovanni passing made me fucking sad. Like so sad. Not like social media post sad. I'm talking about like, what is life sad? It's still, I, it's still almost too sad to touch. And I was noticing that the sadness, when I am sad, I get a little mean. I get a little icy in my throat. My blades get sharpened. My attitude is not the same. I mask the sadness with a defensive hardening that I do not want to become a crust of bitterness. So I have to talk about it and deal with it and see it and feel it and let it tell me what it needs me to know so it can get on down and move on out the way so I can experience joy or have whatever it is that's waiting to be born grow around it. But, I was noticing that wasn't happening. I was becoming more impatient. And then I would just like find myself, like I said earlier today, staring blankly off into space, being like, where did that hour go? Or scrolling on social media, and scrolling on social media, not in a way where I've been wanting to engage. I've been scrolling on social media in a way where I'm just kind of staring into an abyss like, oh gosh, I don't even know. What does that mean? Oh, pass, scroll, double tap. So much judgment, right? And just like a very flat experience of something that I at least would, exact some kind of joy or comfort from, or dopamine rushes or whatever. But even that shit wasn't working. So I was like, yo, we got to do something. So I jumped in a community, went to a coaching call with folks in my online community that gave me some reminders on how to get back into the self energy when the parts seem to show up, because we are all feeling our feelings around this. So this is not just about me. This is absolutely something that is real in the collective. This is just my corner of the internet where I get to talk about my experience of it. And if you like it, you get to listen. And if you don't, you can turn it off. But the solutions for that for me were like, prayer and ritual. My ritual practices of like taking care of my house, myself, my body, my dog, my altars, the plants, walking meditations, just looking at trees, being outside, breathing deeply, and going on a brisk walk in cold weather, just having to get outside. I definitely threw myself into work. I was going hard in the paint at work, and writing is the thing that I need to do that I probably have the hardest time doing when I feel out of sorts like this. So that has really been a challenge for me. So what did I do? I went to therapy. I got some therapy, which everybody should do. You should go if you have access to it. Can I just say this? This is total sidebar. Use your benefits. I'm mainly talking to Black folks. Like, if you have a job that offers you a benefits package. Please use them. Please take advantage of them. Schedule the doctor's appointments and go. Yes, pay the copay. Go to the doctor. You are not saving anything or sticking it to the man or helping to say, viva la revolucion to the healthcare system by not using the benefits that you pay for. So if you have access to healthcare, thanks Obama, please use it. So schedule your appointment, go get your teeth cleaned, schedule an appointment with a mental health practitioner. It's covered. Your copay should be around $10. Just take full advantage of that while you can. Okay. And rant. So I went to therapy. Cool part about my therapist is she is trained in IFS therapy, which is internal family systems, which I've spoken about before. It is a practice that is used in mental health and the coaching space as a methodology to help individuals unblend different parts or schema that are characteristics, traits, behaviors that comprise one's interior world through our thoughts, feelings, and actions. So anytime you are, say, for instance, you're like, a part of me just feels like, or I don't know what came over me. Or, that's not really me, but there is a version of me that, or, you know what I mean? Like sometimes we even as Black girls have like whole characters with different names, like persona, like identities, right? For instance, I have a part named Keisha. Keisha is rah rah and Keisha turns up. Keisha drinks brown liquor and like smokes blunts and like will, is not afraid of fisticuffs, Keisha's a part. Keisha, she gets to chill now. She ain't got to study war no more. But we had a time. I have a part that I refer to as Miss Etta. Miss Etta is my 80-year-old Black lady who lives inside me, who is very judgmental and wants things to be, lap scarf and a lap blanket. She's, stop making all that noise and get from around here with that foolishness. Okay, that's Miss Etta. I have a part named Joan. Joan is the accountant. She does the books. Joan is no nonsense. She does not play. Joan is often sick of everybody's shit and would just like me to, spend my money wisely. So Joan has been very thrilled with the adulting that I have done in the past 2 months. Me, full self, I'm like, all right, Joan, I'm gonna let you get that off. You put in the work for years, babe. I'm gonna let you go ahead and get us together, girl. So like, but not all parts have names. We haven't met all of our parts yet. And some parts have been functioning without us ever even acknowledging their existence and even coming to the place of understanding that they exist and what their purpose is. The parts can show up to protect, to manage, or defend. So they are protectors, managers, and firefighters who function inside of our psyche or our internal system, similar to a family in a big old house, and everybody has a role in that house. All of those parts work together to protect the most vulnerable versions or iterations of ourselves, which are the story keepers. I guess the story keepers probably sadly are like the flowers in the attic or in the basement of our lives where they don't really come out because they don't necessarily act right. And when they show up, shit gets wild, brolic. So we have created these schema or personality traits and behaviors to protect the most vulnerable, to manage the upset should one or more of these parts act out of character or get out of line, and the firefighters to go in to, say for instance, somebody does slip past a manager and a protector and get ready to show up on some bullshit. The firefighters know how to calm everything down, how to bring it down to quelle, how to put out the fire by fucking fighting, shopping, drinking, sleeping, shut it down before anything gets too out of hand. So that's kind of like the quick and dirty of internal family systems. The thing that I want you to know is that we all have parts and our parts are on our side. They are not working to harm you and oftentimes are unaware that their behaviors could be causing a negative impact or repercussions in your lives. Also, you can be experiencing more than one part at the same time, might show up with differing opinions about or differing perspectives about a situation that can cause like a bit of cognitive dissonance or like a moment of like, what the hell? On the one hand, I really want to slap the shit out of this person. And on the other hand, I deeply saddened and a little bit afraid of what's going on here. It's very, very, very human. I won't say normal. I will say human. It is very human to have these experiences. All the parts want is for us to be okay. But in order for us to figure that out, we have to show up as somebody's got to be in charge, right? Remember how I said going to the parts party, myself was in the back of the bus when it needed to be driving it? That's what self energy is. Self energy is when you show up and you are the sun in the solar system, and the parts are like the clouds in the sky, you know? So even on a cloudy day, the sun is still shining, right? So you are self all the time. The parts are protecting, managing, and fighting fires to make sure that your sun doesn't forget to shine. Now, when I say that, like, when has the sun ever forgotten that it's the sun, right? Sometimes we forget that we're the sun. Sometimes we forget to be the sun in our solar system. We forget to be the title character on our sitcom, right? So if we're a family sitcom and all these parts gather together in the living room, our name is on the title card and everybody else is a walk-on role, walk-on character, and we get to be the center of that particular universe in what's happening internally in our minds. We see it in the Pixar film out Inside Out 1 and Inside Out 2. Inside Out 2 did an exceptional job of really delving deeper into the psyche and what happens when more parts start to show up, because our relationships become more complex and complicated and our emotions become more complex and nuanced, right? So internal family systems has really been a game changer for me personally and professionally. Learning this skill set of how to be a guide for myself and for coach partners in how we navigate our parts to get a better understanding of their intentions and what it is that the parts think that they're doing for us, to assess or to get clear about how we might be behaving toward that part in a way that's causing some of the friction and tension that's creating the upset or the crises that we're experiencing internally, and then thereby projecting onto other people or acting out about or just walking around bound up in our own inner turmoil. So that's a lot about parts. One of my parts that does not have a name is the perfectionist. Perfectionism is a long time challenge for me. And I think for Black women in particular, I've met and talked to so many Black women who are in my family, my mama, Black women who I'm in relationships with, Black women who I've witnessed growing up, who are just, we think, or we perceive them as perfect and above reproach. And like, I think to some degree, like every Black woman got a little bit of Beyonce in her because Beyonce is a Black woman, So that's one of the examples that I would use. But, my grandmother, like, I don't know, this archetype of the pinnacle of Black womanhood is shrouded in a certain type of perfection outside of whatever the societal norm says. So like even like inside the archetypes, there's a standard of perfection inside each archetype of Black womanhood, right? So I'm gonna just put a pin in that for a second because I'm gonna come back to it. Perfectionism for me looks this way. When I went to therapy and my therapist gave me the idea, or gave me the practice of visualizing having a conference, a board meeting with all of my parts. Because remember how I said I was going to the parts party? The parts that were at the parts party were Caution, the perfectionist, Joan, the accountant. I talked to you about her. There was definitely Fear. There was very fretful version of myself at the party. Doubt, the part that showed up. There is a 19-year-old version of me who is just like, what the fuck, adulthood, ill. She was there. There's also the wise elder, not Miss Etta, but the wise, ascended, highest version of myself who's there. There's also the coachpreneur me, the one who is like, ooh, we got to get this business. We got to get this. What are we doing? How do we market our skill set? How do we attract the ideal client? What's our niche? That one, girl. And also myself. And when I am in self energy, it is to be calm, connected, compassionate, curious, creative, courageous. What is the other one? I always forget. I always forget the eighth C. I don't know. I can't remember the AC. But to have these 8 characteristics of self energy to let me know that I'm like, okay, I'm solid. I'm the sun in the solar system. Got it. Sun still shines on a cloudy day. Cool. All these parts are clouds in the sky, and clouds protect the people from UV rays. So this is great. We're just filtering out some of the heat because all of me, my whole self, this light is bright. Okay. Put on sunglasses, everybody, because we out here. So this is the setup. So in this visualization exercise, we call a board meeting and sit everybody down to the table. Child, I done drew a a table with the board meeting and put the name cards at each of the seats. Okay. And we're just going to start talking to the parts and get curious about them. And perfection had some gems for me today. And that's how we got to this episode. So in my parts conference, when it was time for perfectionism to speak, one of the first questions that we ask perfectionism is like, well, what does it think it's doing for you? What is the job that perfection is doing for you? And I mean, I started off not in self energy. I was definitely defensive and a little bit judgmental, where I was like, I've already done this. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I get it. I'm not perfect. I'm excellent. Blah blah. Like, I was kind of annoyed that perfectionism was even like rearing its head, because I'm like, everything is perfect. Look at how hard that's why we're so tired, because I've been listening to you, perfection. So I was kind of tussling with myself before I even got to the question. So I had to like shift my approach and calm my energy to really be curious and authentic about like, well, what is it that's causing perfectionism to like rear its head right now? I think everything's fine, but this part is tripping, and my spirit is upset, and my sleep is being disturbed, and I'm stressed about things in spite of the fact that I have all of these, privileges and all of these things to be grateful for. So what is that about? I had to get grounded and ask the questions. So I asked perfectionism, like, well, what does it do for me in the system? What's its job? Right. And, perfection is like, girl, I work for you. I keep you safe. I engender value for what you produce. I ensure that you are perceived as worthy of what you ask for. I ensure I set the standard for when enough is met. And that ensures your ability to belong in the spaces where you show up. And I was like, whoa, okay. Well, thank you. That's a lot, but thank you. You're doing so much, right? Like, it's very easy to like, when the parts get the floor and you don't typically let them speak, and then they show up and they start giving you information, it's very easy to want to like argue with the parts. If that happens, you might not really be in self. It might be another part that shows up because it also wants to protect you from whatever feelings might be being activated by hearing this part that we've been using the firefighters to, mute, or to silence, or to turn down for sometimes a really long time. So when those other parts came up where it's like, well, I'm curious about how that's working for you, it was like, there's a little bit of judgment there. So I'm going to need the curiosity and the judgment to go sit in the corner in the boardroom, and I will be back with them in just a moment. But first, we're going to let perfectionism tell me what it does for me. And it did. It was like, read the room, look around, all of this. What do you mean? And you want to recover from me? You want to separate yourself, disabuse yourself of the need to have me be perfect? But what you mean? I did all this. And I was like, okay, talk your shit, perfectionism. Go ahead then. Like, I had to just, listen to that part of myself, be really annoyed that it works so hard and I work harder to try to act as if it's not doing anything. So I'm like, but what is your intention? Like, what do you want? What do you want? What is when you get that, like what is why perfectionism as a way to get safety and assign value and worth? Like, what is it about that? And y'all, this part really cracked me because the intention is so beautiful. It wants to make things beautiful. Perfection wants to create ease and delight for the people I love and am in community with, and for the things that I love and find beauty and value in inherently. It wants to create containers for joy and celebration. It wants to highlight the reality of joy as being an essential component of human existence. It wants to honor humanity through joy and beauty. Like, what? Perfection wants, its intention is to optimize, give an optimal expression of light. Like, what? Very truly, it's the Oshun in me. Oreyeyo. It's the Oshun in me, right? And I was like, okay, whew. So I had to sit with that. I had to sit with it. I was like, girl, okay, I'm sorry, perfectionism. I've been so hard on you. And I think I've been hard on you. And that's been hard for you. And the negative connotation associated with perfectionism started to, I was like, well, where did that come from? Because the intention of perfectionism is something that's so beautiful and feels so values aligned at the core of my being and who I am on a cellular level. Where did that get gross and obnoxious and like, Martha Stewart popped up in my notes, like, you need to recover from perfectionism and you need to not be resist perfection. And I'm like, there's negative connotation associated with it, like you have a perfectionist part and now you're dealing with your perfectionism. And I had this very conflicted view of perfectionism and wanted to like wrestle it to subdue it, because I'm like, this is really inconvenient, because me being a perfectionist makes me difficult. Me being a perfectionist makes me shut down when things don't go my way. Me being a perfectionist makes me work really hard to ensure that things go my way. And then when they don't, I shut down anyway, or I become so exhausted that I can't produce. And then I feel shame and guilt. And then I'm in a shame spiral and I feel guilty and I can't get shit done. And then I'm resentful toward the perfectionism. Like, it was this vicious cycle that was just like, shit. That's the trick bag that I've been caught up in. And also, fear is a near companion to perfectionism. So like, fear is very nervous about perfectionism not going off the rails. Like, fear is very near to that. So the next thing I did was I cried. I cried about it. I got very emotional. I had to release some big emotions about it because it was just like, man, I didn't know. And giving perfection the opportunity to speak, to ask it like how it was feeling about all that. Like, I mean, perfectionism kind of went in, It was like grandiose, even. Like, I run things now run me. Perfectionism was like, why? Look around, girl. I was like, no, so you want to fight back. Perfectionism like to tussle. Oh, okay. Well, where is that coming from? And that brought me to this next question. I was like, well, since this doesn't really like align, like your intentions are really beautiful, perfectionism. Like, I am really grateful. I was actually kind of like a little tickled, a little enamored with the braggadocious, grandiose nature of perfection, to be like, yeah, we make shit beautiful. And that matters just for the sake of its beauty. And that matters. All the other shit we don't want to deal with, but we will, in the name of making things beautiful and being a full expression of the divine light. And I was like, damn, okay, so do you need a different name? Do you want, like, what do you need? And then y'all, like, clear as a bell, it came to me, decolonize my relationship or my view of perfectionism. Decolonize. And I was like, what the hell? My therapist was like, ooh, that's good. I don't know. You should probably do some research about that. So, I did. And my beef with perfectionism for a long time has been that it's, one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. And Tema Okun is an author and scholar who is a white woman, but has done work in collaboration with and alongside Black thinkers, Black feminist scholars, Black movement leaders, Kimberly Crenshaw, Resma Menakem, Adrienne Marie Brown, Christina River Chapman, Cynthia Brown. It's an extraordinary number of Black and Brown social justice movement leaders, thinkers, activists, writers, the whole nine. And in the in 1990s, she wrote this paper on the characteristics of white supremacy culture. It listed 15 behaviors, all of which are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Among them are perfectionism, a sense of urgency, defensiveness and or denial, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, the belief in one right way, paternalism, either or binary thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, progress defined as more, the right to profit, objectivity, and the right to comfort. So I've long spoken about the work of systems of systemic oppression and its work to disconnect us from source, to disenfranchise us from our bodies, to discredit our personal narratives and the value of our lived experiences, and to really dehumanize us. I've long spoken about that. Teach in It's Bigger Than Bath Bombs around liberatory self-care practices that allow us to reconnect with spirit and our emotional body, and to reconnect ourselves to source energy, to re-engage to reclaim our body sovereignty, and also to rewrite the narrative of who we are and reclaim a new narrative of self as methods toward liberation and freedom. But remember at the beginning, I said that healing is nonlinear, it is cyclical, it is a journey, it is messy, it will bring you back again to reconsider and look again and to reassess. And so when it dawned on me that when it came to me that I would need to look at decolonizing my relationship to perfectionism in this period of reflection and reassessment of my parts and what they are telling me I need or they need in order for me to be whole in self, perfectionism popped into my head. And I was like, oh, Tema Okun, white supremacy culture. Perfectionism is a characteristic of white supremacy culture, but what does that mean for me? So I went back to the text and I read the updated version of this document that has been informed by more contemporary work to add more of an intersectional framing to the 15 characteristics of white supremacy culture. So white supremacy culture, and racism are fear-based. White supremacy uses fear to disconnect us in multiple ways, such as disconnecting us from across racial identities, disconnecting each other within our racial groups, so intra-racial conflict, to disconnect us from ourselves. And remember how I said at the beginning that it's my mission to reconnect or get as many Black women as possible to be guided toward self energy. This is what I'm talking about. To disconnect us from the earth, wind, and sky, and all the creatures that roam the earth. Okay. Source, that disconnection from source energy. Disconnecting us from source, God, and creativity, or whatever you call the wisdom that we carry inside of us, right? So that did not change. In the update, perfectionism, one right way, paternalism, and objectivity are kind of enmeshed. Those are some of the intersections of the concept of perfectionism. But I was really struck by the characteristics of perfectionism as they're described in the updated Okun piece about white supremacy culture, Still Here, which I will link in the show notes. Perfectionism shows up as little or no appreciation expressed among people for the work that others are doing. When appreciation is expressed, it is often or usually directed to those who get most of the credit anyway. Okay. Now, we internalize white supremacy culture and ideas, ideology, hegemonic systems of oppression, domains of power. It is the air that we breathe, it is the water that we swim in, it is the water, right? And that's the reality of it. Our work in decolonizing and liberation is to separate ourselves from the lie and to literally like breathe new air, right? So that work is nuts. And the work of oppression is never complete, but the work of liberation is like hard boots. And we're out here doing it. So we're looking at these, the way that this shows up in the way that like when white folks do it, when the people, them folks down at your job do it, but also it's in us and we carry it around with us wherever we go, with or without whiteness being in the room with us, right? Like the whiteness is like in us, which feels kind of gross to say, but that's the work of decolonizing, is to acknowledge where it lives and where it's functioning in you and to be like, ooh, not that, not that. So no appreciation, little or no appreciation, just not really acknowledging it. How often do you avoid an expression of acknowledgement or a celebration of yourself for things that you have accomplished, the things that you have done? Or find yourself doing it when you see somebody else? Do you have a hard time clapping for somebody else? Right? So, more common is to point out either how the person or work is inadequate, or even more common to talk to others about the inadequacies of a person or their work without ever talking directly to them. That shit, that's white shit. Hating, judging, a good kiki about how what that person did just was not enough and you would have done it differently or whatever. That ain't nothing but the oppressor. That's perfectionism showing up as white supremacy culture. When mistakes are seen as personal, so like you make a mistake and it reflects badly on the person making it as opposed to being just seen as a mistake. Like, I can't make a mistake. I can't miss a deadline. I can't be like, oh shit, I didn't know that that was my responsibility. I didn't, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. I'll do a better job next time. Without spinning into like some fucking existential crisis of like, what does this mean? What do they think about me? Right? Perfectionism. The person making the mistake or doing something quote unquote wrong rarely participates in defining what doing it right looks like or acknowledging whether or not a mistake actually occurred. Come on, somebody. Like, well, how now is it a mistake or do we just get to the answers different ways? It takes me back to 5th grade math. Okay. Now you want me to show my work, but we got the same answer. So if I do show my work, you're going to correct my work, or are you going to acknowledge the fact that we both got the same answer? Or what if the work is right and the answer was different? I don't know, but there's just very little room for discussion and any like pushback that you give to ask questions, to get curious about it, to ask is, in many situations where whiteness is leaping, shows up and is perceived as you being combative or difficult or intimidating or argumentative or aggressive, right? And nobody wants that. So it's easier to be perfect so that you can avoid finding yourself in those situations where you are perceived in that way. It's like tap dancing on razor blades, you know? So, some other characteristics, there's a few more here. Little time, energy, or money is put into reflection or identifying lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, there's little or no learning from mistakes and little investigation of what is considered a mistake and why. It's just an expectation without an agreement, an expectation that this would just be done. And if you didn't do it, I can find somebody else to do it. Right. So then all of the pressure on the perfectionist is like, I gotta get this right. But what is right? Who said what right is? And I mean, it is extremely crippling when you're a creative person because creativity relies so heavily on process and presence and play and these very like nuanced, free spirited, like open ended, experiences to lead to, done when spirit says so, like you season until your ancestors tell you to stop, kind of spiritual experience. But when that is confined into like a professional work environment or workspace, it can feel debilitating to try to function and produce inside of those types of containers. And again, when the perfectionism is coming from inside the house, like inside our internal systems, we often do the work of brooding over that process and identifying right. Also, often without resources or agency or information that is necessary to get closer to whatever the desired outcome is that our, you know, superiors or whoever has put in place for us. So it's like perfectionism nightmare for real. To be creative and to be a perfectionist and to be working under surveillance and supervision from people who ascribe to whiteness as a standard of everything is so hard. So it's often internally felt. In other words, the perfectionist fails to appreciate their own good work, more often pointing out their faults or failures, focusing on inadequacies and mistakes rather than learning from them. The person works with a harsh and constant inner critic that has internalized the standards set by somebody else. Well, shit. Can I get a motherfucking amen? Like, yo, this is it failing to appreciate their own good work. So remember how I told you when I asked my perfectionist today, like, girl, what did you mean to do? And the perfectionist is like, read the room, chick. I did all this. That's perfect. That was perfect. That was perfect. You did that. That was excellent. That was amazing. You did that. You nailed that. That was so good. You're doing so good. It just pointing to all these different examples of like, bitch, you doing a good job. Yeah, you doing a good job that I just overlooked because I'm constantly in my head about it. And even when there is no overseer overseeing me, the internal overseer, the inner critic is doing the work of them. This is something that is absorbed into our becomes a part of our DNA. So the work of decolonization on an individual level, y'all, is so important. And at the very least, we go back to those first steps of healing. Like we have to go from impossible to possible. We got to take baby steps. So I know a lot of people will hear this and be like, that's just the way that the world works. That's just the way it needs to be. That's just what's required of you. That's just how I am. It's just who I am. I need you to understand that there comes a time where you're going to have to change. You might have to change. You got to be the will to change. Word to bell hooks. The will to be transformed. The will to walk through the fire and to be transmuted so that transmutation, let that occur so that you can take flight as a phoenix. Like to be the butterfly in the cocoon, to turn to goo, not knowing that you are going to emerge as this flighted, colorful, geometric impossibility that is now inevitable because you got yourself somewhere and sat down for a couple of weeks. It's going to require that you change. That's in the resistance that you are experiencing, the internal conflict, the cognitive dissonance that is rattling around in your mind is largely due to the fact that something on the inside is trying to inform you that it's time to change. A need is going unmet, and change or a shift in perspective or facing a different direction or reaching for a different tool than one that you have always used or asking for feedback or input from somebody else would inform a decision that will open the floodgates, that will move you from impossible to possible, that will shift the possible to the probability of a future where you see yourself as whole and worthy and loved and fulfilled and safe and here, so that you can become the good ancestor, so that you can continue to put one foot in front of the other because you are on a journey. And so not everything has to be a trek. It can be a stroll. It could be a walk, but you got to keep moving, like don't give up. Don't give up. I mean, Malcolm X told us that we really have to disabuse ourselves from feeling like we want a revolution, but we think ain't gonna be no blood. Like, no mud, no lotus, no fire, no phoenix, no goo, no butterfly, no blood, no revolution. That's just what has to happen. The Okun updated Still Here, White Supremacy Culture piece from Okun has another word about perfectionism. There is no relationship between perfectionism and excellence. Perfectionism is the belief that we can perfect or perform perfectly. But the question has to be asked, according to who decides what perfect is? Perfection is the enemy of done, of complete, of finished. Okay? Who said? Whose voice is inside your head? What little internal colonizer? Do you have does it look like Napoleon? Is it Christopher Columbus? Is it like, Leonardo DiCaprio and Django? Like, who is it that is in your mind that is critiquing your existence? I don't know. So the excellence piece goes on to talk about this pursuit of excellence, and Black excellence can also be a pitfall for Black folks to feel like we have to do some more work other than just exist. So I say, I feel like I'm an excellentist. I feel like I have excellent taste. I feel like I'm Venusian. I appreciate beauty and splendor. You know what I mean? So I think I season till the ancestors say so, and I do things that please me. And if it pleases me, if it is a play, when I look at it, I'm like, I like this, like Nikki Giovanni, so simple, and all of the prolific nature of her good writing and all of her works to hear her speak. And she said, I like that. I like this. And that's it. And that is enough. So I think that's where I've come with my relationship with perfection today. And will I revisit it on another day? Sure. There are 14 other characteristics in this document that are all intersecting and connected. I named them a few moments ago. I will share the document. I suggest that you read it and look at some of the collaborative work and some of the partner articles and pieces and research that has gone along with this concept of like how white supremacy culture functions in social justice movements. But also I send this article to all of my coach partners who work in corporate spaces. So all of my EDs and corporate executives, professionals who are navigating the workspace, I send the document just so that they can get some distance between the internalized oppressor and the actual oppressors. So we can not do too much of carrying other people's work, carrying the work of the oppressor, and also having our internal Leo DiCaprio gremlins inside of us making shit extra hard. Because in decolonizing my relationship to perfectionism, I realized that I'm Oshun's daughter. Oshun makes life sweet. She makes life worth living. The pleasantries, the beauty, the ease, the flow of fresh water, the life source, the creative energy, the mirror's reflection. Like that's it. That's my decolonized relationship to perfection, is the divine expression of light in the human experience of joy and laughter and creativity and love and luxury and pleasure, and the fact that we deserve to see ourselves elevated. So for that, I am eternally grateful. And that is how I want to relate to the idea of perfection. And how do I know who? Me. Who said? Me. And how will I know what is the standard? If it pleases me, if I like it, and then it's done. I'm gonna season it till the ancestor says so. And if I don't like it, try again next time. So that was the work around perfectionism that that wanted to come out of my face today from the chair in the corner. I kind of like this little setup over here, Avery. What do you think? I like not being at the desk to record the podcast episodes. I really do. I don't sit in this chair often enough, except for, well, not often enough. I'll be in the living room or whatever, but the light is in here and all the things. So that brings us to the end of this week's episode. I am so grateful to you for listening, for being here with me week to week, catching up when you can. There's a lot of discourse in the social media space about like how people don't need podcasts. And I agree. Like the things that some people talk about on podcasts, I just be like, wow. I mean, wow. So if they can, why can't I, Lord? I mean, just really. So this podcast, I hope you can experience and enjoy because you find something true for yourself in it. This is an invitation to be in community around these thoughts and ideas. So your comments on the social media links and reels are very appreciated. Send me an email. You can email me at hello@ebonyisisbooth.com. This is a totally independently produced zhuzh. It's just me and this app and my dog hanging out in my office. So you can support me by sending a cash app to $ honeysuckle creatives with an S at the end. That would be super dope to put something on my Riverside feed, which is the editing software that I use. Yeah, send me an email. I want to talk about it. I've been thinking about ways to engage with the younger generations. And so I want to have a segment called Ask Auntie for Gen Alpha, Gen Z, younger women to like ask questions to a self-led, grounded, experienced Black woman who is also an auntie, to ask a question that maybe you didn't ask your mama. Don't feel like you can ask your aunties that they're not going to tell you the truth, or, someone that you just need to hear a word from. So send an email to hello@ebonyisisbooth.com and put Ask Auntie in the subject line, and maybe I'll read it on a show in 2025. There's some good things agwan. There'll be some community calls coming back. It's Bigger Than Bath Bombs will come back next year in the spring. I promise. I'm just trying to figure out how to make that work. And then looking at some online classes or online courses, Ritualize Your Routine, and bringing back Pathways to Purpose. So you'll see more accessible ways to work with me coming down the pipe in 2025. I'll be sure of it. But in the meantime, in between time, you continue to be light and shine. Kayla, you bye.